Hey everyone, welcome back to part two where we're looking at how many games each team is projected to win in 2025 in the NRL season. And I'm going to go through whether I think they're going to go over or under that number by giving you three reasons they could go over and three reasons they can go under, and then a summary and the projected season wins for each team. This information is straight out of the NRL betting guide, which you can get for free. It's 500 pages of important betting information that you can use to profit on the 2025 NRL season. So if you haven't already downloaded it, make sure you do that straight away before placing any bets this season. You can use it on your phone. I've optimized it for my mobile device, or you can use it on your computer, and you can easily go through team by team or overall on the league. So it's a super valuable tool that I'm really excited to share with you guys this season. In part one, we went through the first 12 teams, and then I ran out of time. So if you haven't seen that already, I'll put the link for that video in the description so you can go back and check that one out. But here we're going to go through the final six teams. So that's the Panthers, Dolphins, Rabbitohs, Dragons, Roosters, and West Tigers. So firstly, the Penrith Panthers. Last year, they won 17 games, just went under their line of 17 and a half. With, Jerome Luai going out of the side in particular, the bookmakers have adjusted the line down to 15 and a half wins. So for the over, Penrith have won 16 or more games in each of the past 5 seasons. And in fact, it's been 17 or more. So they've not just won the 16 that they'll need to win this year. They've actually won 17. But last year, when they won 17, that was the lowest number of wins they've had during the regular season across the past 5 years. So, we've kind of seen that little gradual decline there with them, but they've consistently been covering the number that they need to this year. Last year, they are again the most dominant defensive side. That's now been for 4 straight seasons, which co-aligns with why they keep on winning the premiership. If you want to know, why defense matters so much and how it correlates with the teams that win the premierships, there's a whole chapter on that in the betting guide. Even if their attack regresses, so with Truva and Luai going out of the side, that mostly impacts their attack, not necessarily their defense. So if their defense, stays strong, they can afford that slight regression in attack and still, win close to that 16, 17 game mark. Their double up games they have this year, 3 of those are against the bottom 3 sides, so 15th, 16th, and 17th from last season. So that's the Eels, Rabbitohs, and West Tigers. And they also have winnable games around the origin period. So, if Cleary ends up playing for the Blues this season and, misses the lead-up games, Penrith do still have a chance of winning those matches as well. So, they're definitely well positioned to win a similar number of games they have over the previous, 4 to 5 years. From an under perspective, they do have a tougher draw this year, and obviously starting with the trip to Las Vegas. And as I mentioned, they have lost Luai and Truva, but the other key thing that I did kind of forget to mention in terms of defense is they do lose James Fisher-Harris from the front row. So that could definitely impact them from a defensive perspective and also, hurt their meterage going forward. 2024, even though they were still the number 1 defensive side, it was their worst year defensively over the past 4 seasons. So once again, we've seen that gradual decline also in their defensive numbers. But that has coincided with an increase in scoring in the NRL. So you can't fully be like, oh, well, their numbers are dropping off because they are still ranked number 1. But if we do see a further drop off defensively, that's definitely going to push them under this number. Cleary only played 10 regular season games last season. The Panthers were 8-2 in those games, and both the losses were against the Melbourne Storm. They were able to rely on Luai when Cleary was out of the side, but they don't have the luxury of doing that anymore. So, any injuries to Cleary will, I think, make it very, very difficult for the Panthers to win 16 or more games. From a line perspective, with it at 15 and a half, I don't really have an opinion on it going over or under. I had the Panthers projected to win 15 to 16 games this season, so I think the bookmakers have nailed the line bang on with this one. Can see them losing 1 to 2 more games than they did last year, assuming, everything goes to plan. For the Redcliffe Dolphins, last year they won 11 games and cleared the 10.5 season win line. This year, that number has been lowered. They're one of those few sides where the number is now lower than what it was last year, even though they won more games than they were expected to with a 9.5 win line. This is now their third season in the NRL, and kind of you'd expect them to take another step forward with the core group and the majority of the players now playing their third season together. Obviously, a lot of these players all came from different teams, and it takes time for those players to gel together compared to, teams where there's one new player coming in, or they've just got two new players coming in, and the other 15 players have all been playing together previously. So I think from that perspective, you can definitely see more upside with the Dolphins. They did cover the line last season by winning the 11 games and did lose 8 games by 8 points or less. So they could have easily won more than the 11 games. They obviously won a few by small margins, but to lose 8 games by 8 or less, there's definitely winnable opportunities in there. And a lot of those losses came from poor second half performances. So if they can clean that up a little bit, then they're well on track to winning 11 plus games again this season. And they need 10 to cover the line as well. Probably the biggest news is they lose Wayne Bennett, but Christian Wolf, who takes over, has been the assistant coach the past 2 seasons and likely implements a similar game plan as to what they've been doing, with a focus on cleaning up a few of the areas where they've struggled. And he had plenty of success coaching over in the English Super League with St. Helens, leading them to 3 championships. So I don't think it's an absolute detrimental loss by any means, but from an unders perspective, the loss of Wayne Bennett as coach is no doubt, an important factor when considering the Dolphins this season. He's built the side up, and without his leadership and guidance for these players, is it going to make an impact on their performance? If you think it definitely is, then you could potentially be looking at the under. As I mentioned, they really struggled in the second half last season, especially in the second half of the year. They lost 10 off their final 11 second half. So when you just isolate the second half performances and whether they outscored or were beaten by the opponent just in the second half, they really, really did struggle. I couldn't really pinpoint an exact reason for this. Obviously, fitness is a big one. Mindset is probably the two biggest things where you can kind of group teams in as they're the potential reasons for collapses in second half. So I think that's probably the key area of focus for the Dolphins this year. They put themselves into winning positions but can't close out games. And, it could also be when the play goes up a notch and, there's more on the line in that final 20 to 30 minutes. They're just not quite at that level yet. And then the third reason is they have a mostly below average attack and defense. So there's still a lot of improvement they need to make in order to win more games. And it is expected to be a more even competition this year. So if that improvement still continues to take time and doesn't evolve like they want it to, then they potentially will drop under that 10 win mark. But at a line of 9.5, I'm definitely looking towards the over here, with the Dolphins winning 10 to 11 games again this season. I'd probably more so lean towards the 11 and then mirroring what they did last season. I can't see a major drop off though with the Dolphins, so I do like the over there. The South Sydney Rabbitohs, last year only won 7 games and were well below the 13.5 win line that they're expected to win. Small adjustment down to a 12.5 line for this season. For the Rabbitohs, they've won 12 plus games in 6 of the past 7 seasons, and they have gotten to 13 plus in 4 of those. So they have really been around this mark where the line is set, but they do need to win 6 more games than last year in order to cover this line. So it's going to require pretty significant improvement. They got off to a slow start last season, but did win 5 of their 7 games by 13 plus points. So when they did win, they really put teams away, and that was all kind of in the middle part of the season. If you look at their game log, which is in the Rabbitohs section in the betting guide, it'll show you how, those first 10 weeks, then they won the 1 game, were blown out, and a lot of them, they had this good patch during the middle of the season, then dropped right away at the end. But when they were playing well, they were beating up on sides, which is a positive for a team that, you could see them win more games next year. I don't know if it's enough for them to win 6 more. That'll require significant improvement. They definitely had massive issues defensively in 2024. And The good news from this perspective, even though we know defense is so important in terms of winning games, this hasn't been a consistent long-term pattern. So therefore, it's possible for them to turn it around. It's not like, they've had 3 or 4 back-to-back seasons of being poor defensively. They were really good up until last year. So they can definitely roll it back and get back on track. From a negative perspective, for them to go under the 12.5 line, they lose the experience of Damien Cook at hooker. Cody Walker is now 35 years old, and Lewis Dodd, who comes in playing in the halves with him, is playing his first season in the NRL. He's been previously playing over in the Super League. And the other thing is Latrell Mitchell keeps picking up injuries. I think I saw he's picked up an injury, hamstring injury in the preseason, is out for the first 7 or 8 weeks. And then Cam Murray with an Achilles injury, likely to be out for the season. I haven't seen a confirmation of that, but that's currently what's looking likely to happen. And overall, to summarize this for the Rabbitohs, is like they have a lot of issues in their spine. So fullback, halves, and hooker. Without Damien Cook, Cody Walker coming right towards the end of his career, Lewis Dodd potentially could take some time to pick it up at NRL level. That was kind of the issue they had with Lachlan Ilias last season, and then with Latrell Mitchell out at fullback, and then you also take Cam Murray away at lock. Like, there's just a lot of issues there with the Rabbitohs that Wayne Bennett's definitely going to have to figure out. And to be honest, like, there's no foreseeable improvement in 2025. It's more so that, like, well, they just did really bad last year. They need to get back to what they did the year prior. But when you analyze those previous years, back when they were in the grand final in 2021, they had a much stronger team on paper than they do nowadays. So you can't really just be like, oh, well, they were a good team a few years ago. We'll just ignore last year and they'll be back to their best. There's a lot of different players in there, and personally, I just can't see them getting back to that form this quickly. They've been dropping away the past 4 seasons as well. As I mentioned, in that 2021 grand final, that season they won 20 games. Then they dropped down to 14, 12, and then 7 last season. The points for, so their average points a game has dropped each year as well. And their points conceded has risen each year, which you'd expect, but we've seen a real consistent pattern on, all 3 of those areas there. So there's been issues on both sides of the ball, lots of areas that they need to fix up, and to, win 6 more games than they did last year is just too much for me. I'm definitely looking at the under again for the Rabbitohs, under that 12.5 mark. Honestly, I'd be surprised if they won more than 10 games. 11 would be my absolute max if kind of everything went to plan for them. So definitely looking at under 12.5 is probably one of the stronger ones. Rabbitohs were the main team I faded last year, and they're definitely up there again because, like, from a betting perspective, they're just given so much like expectation and like a lot of hype around them. So I'm definitely happy to fade that. And if everything they just played an absolute perfect season, then they win 13 or 14 games, then I'm happy to cop the loss on the under. For the Dragons, they won 11 games last year, comfortably exceeded the 7.5 win line. It's up to 8.5 this year. As I said, they dramatically exceeded expectations, only winning 5 games in 2023 and winning 6 more in 2024. The betting companies have tried to adjust, moving that line up 1 point. They pick up plenty of experience in Damien Cook, Clint Gutherson, and Valentine Holmes from the Cowboys. And I think like these players can definitely support the young halves pairing where, they lose Ben Hunt, who was very important for them last season. I think for the Dragons, they've done well to pick up and recruit to cover the losses. Obviously losing Hunt and then Zach Lomax, the 2 biggest ones. Valentine Holmes coming in and Gutherson in at fullback. I think like this is a potentially slightly stronger team than we saw last year for the Dragons. Of their 11 wins as well, 6 of them were by 13 points. And cover this in the betting guide. The Dragons were a side that they either won by a lot or lost by a lot. There was not really any in between. And the fact they were able to still win 6 games by 13 plus points does leave them well positioned to win 9 or more again this season. Even though they do pick up plenty of experience, they do have a very young halves pairing, Carl Flanagan and Lachlan Ilias. And the question is this going to be enough for them to win, your 9 plus games and cover it? The halves make such huge impacts in the team's overall performance that, having Gutherson and Holmes and stuff in the side still might not be enough to offset like the development that still needs to come in the halves pairing. So that's like my biggest concern there for the Dragons. They do also have a much tougher draw this season. They had the third easiest schedule last year and now dealt the fifth toughest. So that's a massive, reversal of the teams that they need to play to go from like pretty much close to the easiest draw to now one of the toughest. That's not going to be, you're not going to see more than 11 wins for the Dragons this year. And they also struggled against the top 8 sides, only winning 3 of 13 games against them. So now with a tougher, schedule against more of the top sides, and they weren't able to do it last year, definitely is concerning. And not like when I said they won 6 games by 13 points, but they are blown out 20 plenty of times. 10 losses were by 13 plus points. So they only lost 3 games by that 1-12 margin. The other 10 were all by 13 plus. And of those 10, 8 of them were by 19 plus points. So hopefully like caught all that. All these stats that I'm reading out are all in the betting guide though. For the Dragons, I have them winning 8 games with a potential to push up to 9. So I'm right on the 8.5 line for their games this season, and expect them to drop off slightly from the 11 last year. But I don't think it's like going to be a major slide, but I think the line has adjusted enough for what it needs to. For the Sydney Roosters, they won 16 games last year, up from the 13.5 line that they had, so cleared it by 2.5. They have a lower line this year, just down to the 12.5, obviously with the amount of outs they have in their team this year, which we're going to get to in why they potentially could go under. But reasons they could go over, since Trent Robinson has been coach of this side, they have won 13 or more games in 10 of those 11 seasons. So they've consistently been up there winning enough games to cover this line. The only season they didn't was 2016. Even though they've lost lots of key players, like on paper, they still have a large number of your state and country representative players in this team. So you can't look at them and be like, oh, they've lost all these players. It's probably more so like looking at like losing all those players takes them out of a bit of a premiership window where they had such a strong team. And like, unfortunately for the Roosters, picked up key injuries right at the end of last year with Sam Walker. And also Brandon Smith, which kind of took them out of contention, as without those two on the field, like they couldn't really compete with your Storm and Panthers. But on a positive, like they still have plenty of good players in this team that'll make them competitive in a lot of games. And like they still should have the class to beat up on the lowly ranked sides, which they did last year. They had a 13-1 record against teams who missed the top 8, and they have 13 games against these same teams this year. And off that, I feel like they could still win 10, maybe 11, worst case, maybe 9 wins against these sides. So therefore, to win 13 games, they may only need to pick up 2, 3, or 4 wins against the top 8 sides in order to cover this line. There's no doubt like losing Kiri, Manu, Swalihi, and Warrior Hargreaves is going to have a big impact on this team. And it's kind of a question like how quickly can they overcome it, especially considering they have the hardest draw in the league. So Roosters have been dealt the toughest fixture when you look at the expectations of where each team is likely to finish this year. So that's definitely not ideal and not very good timing for them to overcome the losses of these players. And probably I feel like if you like look at how these like player losses is going to affect them on paper, losing Kiri in the halves puts a lot of pressure on Sam Walker. He's definitely going to have a very, very good season to keep the Roosters in contention. And then I think probably other factor that makes the biggest difference for the Roosters is the losses of Manu and Swahilihi in the centers, because obviously you have Dominic Young and Daniel Tupou on either wing. If they're not getting as good a service and you don't have rep players in the centers, which firstly give very good service to the wingers and, allow them to, make that last pass to then get to the corner in time to score. And also you don't have that center making a line break, which sets it up for the winger. Or third factor is that you don't have a very, very strong center where it forces the opposition winger to be drawn in to try and help the defense, leaving the winger unmarked. Then I think that takes away a big strength of the Roosters of picking up so many tries on the wing. Like, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but Young and Tupou combined for a lot of tries for the Roosters last year. And whether they can do that again this season, obviously Swalihi missed quite a lot of games. If, like, without those players, I think it's going to leave a big gap that they may struggle to fill in the short term. I think from a forwards perspective, they'll be fine, but it'll be from a point scoring perspective. Probably the positive from that is they do have plenty of room to move as they were the number one attacking side last year. So, a decline, which is likely to happen, they have some room to move from that perspective. They did struggle against the other top teams, so they were 3-7 against top 8 sides last year. And they do have double up games against the Storm, Panthers, and Sharks, who will finish in the top 4, and also the Bulldogs, who were a strong top 8 side, especially defensively last year. So from a schedule perspective, that makes it a little bit tough, and they'll probably need to rely again on winning games against the lowly ranked sides. For the Roosters this year, I do have them winning 13 games. I think, they have still enough there to be a contending top 8 side. From a season line perspective, I don't think there's any value in taking the over 12.5, that's for sure. And I wouldn't be confident sitting on an under 12.5 bet all season, considering they still have plenty of games against those low sides that they should be able to win the majority of those and kind of will need to this year. And then finally, the West Tigers. Last year, they won 6 games, were just under their line of 7.5, but that line has now jumped up to 9.5, which I'm going to talk about that a little bit more once we go through the reasons why they could go over and under that number. So for the over, Benji Marshall is now having his second year in charge as coach of the Tigers. They improved in his first year from 4 wins up to 6, and they've obviously added some key players in Luai and Taruva from the Panthers, and it's really hard to see them going backwards again. And they also have a much easier draw this season. So, quite a few positives there for the Tigers. They've also improved their attack each of the past 3 seasons. Even though they're still ranked last in each of those years, they've improved from 14.7 points a game to 16 to 19.3. So nice consistent improvement, adding about 2.5 points to 3 points a game each year. And not like that this is necessarily a positive, but they have been losing a lot of close games over the past 5 years. They have a 10-23 record in games decided by 6 points or less. With a stronger lineup this year, more experience, I think they can turn a few of those close losses into wins moving forward, which will obviously put a few more wins on the board there for the Tigers. Now, from an unders perspective, is they haven't won 10 games since 2019. So each of the past 5 years has been, under that number, and the best was 8 wins. So, they've been 8 or less in the past 5 years. So they're going to need to win 4 more games than last season in order to win the 10 plus that they need to this year. And last year they did lose 17 of the 18 games that they lost by 7 or more points. So there wasn't really that many close games. They only lost 1 close game last season. So, even though over the years they've been losing those close games, they didn't really have that many last year and just lost the 1 by a small margin. I think they were 2-1 in close games. Their struggles in defense makes it really tough for them to win games regardless. Like, they were conceding 31.3 points per game on average. When I broke it down, they were better in the first half of the year. So their first 10 games, they were conceding 22.6 points. And then in the final 14 games of the year, they were conceding 37.4 points a game. So a huge difference. And, that's why they were more competitive in those early games and kind of just picked up the couple of odd wins later on in the season. Add to that, they were the worst attacking side too. There's a lot of improvement they need to make on both sides of the ball. The past 3 seasons in away games, they've only gone 4-32. So 1 and 2 wins were then away game wins over the past 3 seasons. So a total of 4 is really bad. And, every year you get 12 away games, and they're not going to win, 9 home games this year and just pick up 1 win on the road, and that'll get them their 10. Like, luckily, they may win like 6 to 7 at absolute best at home, and therefore they'll still need to win 3 or 4 in away games in order to get to the 10 win mark. For the line of 9.5, Personally, I'm leaning towards the under. I see them winning 8, maybe 9 games. Can't see like an absolute massive improvement pushing them over the number. And, maybe they just get there, but from a betting perspective, and this is something like kind of a betting framework that you can use like for anything that you're betting on, is that in this situation, Tigers are the number one side that the media and everyone talking about is expecting them to improve. They're the side that's been, publicized. Well, they're going to improve, with the recruitments. And because obviously they've been, down the bottom of the table, winning the wooden spoon for 3 years. It's like sooner or later they're going to improve. But what's kind of happened this year is we've seen the betting companies make the adjustment they needed to make with this number to kind of make it mean there's no value in taking the over and there's only a slight amount of value in taking the under. So for the Tigers, for me personally, I won't be betting them at all on the season wins perspective. I think obviously there's all this things that they need for improvement, but from an odds perspective, there's just no value in the prices. Quickly recap the ones that stand out to me the most. And remember, I said at the top of the part 1 of this, overall video, is that you don't want to back more than 4 teams on their season win lines, because, if you have those 2 teams playing each other, say you back like 6, 7, 8 different season win lines, you're going to have a lot of situations throughout the year where those teams are going to play each other. And if you have one team to go over and the other team to go under, and then the team that you need to go under beats that side, you've copped a hit on both sides. So you kind of want to limit how many times that could possibly happen and kind of keep it to 3 to 4 season win lines. So for me, the ones that definitely stand out the most as potential bets are the Raiders to go under the 9.5, Bulldogs to go over 13.5, Seagulls to go over 13.5, Warriors under 11.5, Rabbitohs under 12.5. I think that's 5. Those are the 5 for me that stand out as probably the strongest season win line bets. So hopefully this video, if you haven't seen part 1, that's where we go through the other 12 sides. But it gives you some insight and gets you thinking about, okay, why am I going to take them to go over, or why am I going to take them to go under? It's not enough to just look at, well, how many games have they won last year? It's like looking at and projecting performance throughout the season. So really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want more breakdowns and more stats about every team, the betting guide has 20 plus pages about every single team. Plus, on top of that, there's about 200 pages analyzing the entire league and going through like which teams stood out in different categories, what that means for their overall performances, just so you guys have stacks of information you can use to profit betting on the NRL this season. So definitely check it out, download it as soon as you can, start reading it, and it's going to set you up perfectly for the upcoming season. Obviously, the season kicks off tomorrow. We've got the games in Vegas. We've got the Sharks and Panthers and Raiders and Warriors. And then the rest of the season starts on Thursday. If you want to see everything I'm betting throughout the entire season, every single game, plus obviously which try scorers I'm backing, all that information I'll still be doing, the free YouTube videos covering it. But if you want to get the exact bets with the staking, so then you're actually implementing the whole strategy and not just, random bets here and there, and you're just able to follow each week going, these are the 10 bets or these are the 15 bets I'm having on the NRL this week. You can get that in the NRL membership. The season pass option allows you to get the entire season for less than $20 a week. So you definitely want to get into that at the beginning of the year so you can start strong, build up over the year. And this is kind of how I'm looking at the NRL season. I'm going to do a deeper video breaking down, how you can really profit this year. When it comes to your betting strategy on the NRL, like for me personally, I'm aiming for 50 units profit at the minimum this year. And when I say 50 units profit, we're going to do that through a 10% profit on turnover, not by doing big multis and, or risking major units. Like for a bet, we're only ever risking at most 1.5 units from a 100 unit bankroll. That means, if you have $1,000 you're betting with, you're only ever risking $15 on a single bet. So the risk is absolutely minimalized. And then to get to 50 units, we only need to make 2 units profit each week throughout the season. And the way we do that is through researching the games and then determining which games to bet into and which bets to make, and then sticking with the staking strategy in order to do that and optimizing for consistent profit, not just trying to get, big wins here or there that overcome losses. It's about consistently. If you can make 2 units every week, you're going to make close enough to 60 units for the overall season. And yeah, you might have a week where you lose 1 or 2 units or break even and you didn't hit your 2-unit target. That doesn't matter. It's the long-term average of making 2 units every single week. But, if you have weeks where you lose 8 units, 10 units, 15 units or more, then that totally derails your entire season. And that's what the betting companies are kind of counting on for people to do. They want you to feel like, oh, I need to win this week. They're not thinking about any of the long term and the fact that there's 31 weeks across the entire season, including finals, that you go, all in 1 week, trying to profit 1 week, set yourself back so far that now the overall season is almost near enough to be impossible to profit on. So if you're really, really serious about betting on the NRL this year and making profit, then definitely check out the NRL membership. You can join weekly or you can join for the season pass. So go to the page, check that out. Last season was super profitable on the NRL. During the second half of the season, or like kind of the late third of the season, we're going at 29.7% profit on turnover, and this is without any promotions. As always, I always recommend for everyone, don't bet with any promotions on sports. Make profit on sports without promotions, and then save any promotions you have for horse racing, and you'll make a lot more profits on horse racing by doing that. And then you combine it with your profits on sports, you now have a double strategy to win on horse sports and on horse racing. Thanks guys for watching. Stay tuned for more videos as we count down to the 2025 NRL season.